start the fight, breaking down the walls in the dead of night. I don't come for peace, I come for the storm. Fanboys melt quick when the truth gets warm. Saw content's high, I'm collecting those tears. Just got started, but I'm cutting through fears. I'm not here for brand deals, I'm not for sale. I expose your lies, rip off the veil.
Nintendo is repeating history when it comes to losing third-party support. Now, yes, it is possible for them to maintain these partnerships, but it would require massive changes that based on recent trends they don't seem willing to make. For decades, Nintendo hasn't necessarily needed third-party support to stay relevant. Their first-party games, iconic franchises, and loyal fan base have often been enough. But history shows that over-reliance on internal success without nurturing outside developers comes with serious risks, and right now, Nintendo is flirting with the same mistake they made with the N64 and the Wii U. Let's start with the N64. Back in the late 90s, Nintendo was riding high with the success of the Super Nintendo, and everyone assumed their dominance would continue. But when the N64 launched, they made some major strategic decisions that hurt their relationships with third-party developers. One of the biggest issues was the cartridge format. Unlike PlayStation, which used CDs, the N64 used expensive cartridges that cost a fortune to produce and had limited storage. Third-party developers found this frustrating. It increased costs, limited the complexity of their games, and made it difficult to port titles from other platforms. Meanwhile, Sony's CD-based PlayStation was cheaper, easier to develop for, and allowed for larger, more immersive games. As a result, many developers skipped the N64 entirely or reduced their support, which is why we see so many major franchises migrate to PlayStation or go multi-platform. Fast forward to the Wii U and we see different but equally damaging problems. Nintendo didn't have the cartridge issues here, they used discs. But they had a confusing market messaging and lack of strong hardware capabilities compared to the PS4 and Xbox One. Developers didn't want to invest heavily in Wii U games because the install base was small. The system's hardware was underpowered, and Nintendo's ecosystem didn't support strong multi-platform releases. On top of that, Nintendo didn't do a great job promoting third-party titles. They were overshadowed by first-party releases and the company's own messaging, which prioritized games that only hardcore Nintendo fans would recognize. By the time the Switch arrived, many third-party developers had already written off Nintendo as a reliable platform, which is why Nintendo had to woo them back carefully with the Switch Unique's value proposition. And that brings us to today. The Switch had massive success because Nintendo hit a sweet spot, affordability, strong first-party titles, and pricing that made sense for the market. But the problem now is that Nintendo has raised the prices to align with the rest of the industry, but they haven't raised the quality to match. Games are more expensive, consoles are more expensive, and yet consumers don't necessarily feel like they're getting more for their money. Now you might be thinking, wait, I thought this was about losing third-party support. Why are you talking about first-party games? Bear with me, there's a connection. When prices go up, consumers are forced to make choices. Gamers can only buy so many games. Even if fanboys insist that complaining about price makes you broke or somehow ungrateful, let's break it down. Let's break this down. Say a player buys one game per month and now the price has gone up by just $10 from $60 to $70. That may not sound like a huge difference at first glance, but over the course of a year it adds up. That extra $10 every month becomes $120 more per year just for buying a single game. Now imagine someone like me who typically plays 3 games a month. That same $10 increase now turns into an additional $360 for the year, just to keep up with the same buying habits. And that's not even factoring in the fact that not everyone can write games purchases off on their taxes. Most people are just paying out of pocket for these. What does this mean for the average gamer? Simple. People have to make choices. There's only so much money to spend on games each month, so some titles will inevitably be skipped. For most Switch owners, that prioritizes usually favors Nintendo first-party games. the ones that define the console experience and are guaranteed to be high quality. That leaves less room, both financially and mentally, for third-party titles. And here's the hard truth: third-party developers aren't in the business of charity. They care about one thing: the bottom line. If their games don't sell, they cut support, and the cycle continues. Rising prices, limited consumer budgets, and Nintendo's first-party buying habits make it harder than ever for third-party games to compete on that platform. Let's say that consumers sometimes buy third-party titles over first-party games. Nintendo itself don't make it easy. Third-party games get little marketing support outside of directs, and in those presentations, Nintendo prioritizes games compatible with older consoles or first-party titles that sell the most units. And then there's the game keycard issue. Gamers just don't want them. This forces developers into difficult choices: absorb the extra cost, raise prices, or go all digital, each with its own complications. Let me be blunt, the fault lies largely with Nintendo. They have chosen to use expensive cartridges and convince consumers that AA games are worth AAA prices. This creates an environment where third-party developers can't compete. Nintendo's budgets for first-party games are lower than those of many third-party studios, which in itself is challenging, but combined with pricing strategy and marketing choices, it's a recipe for losing support. And history tells us this isn't new. The N64 lost third-party support because of expensive cartridges and limited storage. The Wii U lost it because of weak hardware, confusing marketing, and a lack of developer incentives. Now with the Switch 2, we're seeing echoes of both mistakes. Prices are rising, the market is saturated with expensive cartridges and digital games, and first-party games dominate attention. Third-party developers are being squeezed out again. Of course, fanboys will insist this is all a conspiracy against Nintendo, but no, it's poor business decisions, plain and simple. Nintendo could turn this around. They could invest in better marketing for third-party games, reevaluate pricing strategies, and create more incentives for developers. But based on patterns from the N64, Wii U, and now the Switch 2, history suggests they probably won't. Meanwhile, many fans defend Nintendo every move, insisting gamers should pay full price for everything to support the company. Blind loyalty isn't going to fix poor business decisions. If Nintendo doesn't adapt, the consequences will be clear. Fewer third-party games, frustrated consumers, and a growing precipitation that Nintendo doesn't play well with others. And that's a problem Nintendo has to face before, and it's very much facing again. Nintendo could turn this situation around, but it would require them to be reasonable and willing to make some sacrifices, something they have rarely shown the patience to do. For starters, the standard 30% cut that Nintendo takes from game sales is a massive hurdle for third-party developers trying to make a profit. Imagine if instead Nintendo were willing to lower that cut to say 10%. It would make the platform far more attractive for developers while still allowing Nintendo to get some profit. I know what the fanboys will say: that's not fair to Nintendo. Why should they take less? Well, let's be real here. This is a consequence of their own poor decisions. Nintendo chose to go with expensive cartridges, a format that nobody really wanted. They knew the costs were high, and yet they went ahead anyway. The decision was theirs, and now it's affecting the ecosystem around their console. Nintendo also needs to loosen the reins on how third-party developers market and release their games. Right now, Nintendo tightly controls visibility, release windows, and promotions, which can make it incredibly difficult for outside developers to succeed. Allowing third parties to market their own titles, choose their release dates, and manage pricing strategies could create a healthier ecosystem for both the developers and the consumers. Make no mistake, Nintendo doesn't need major third-party support to survive. They have Mario, Zelda, Pokemon, Super Smash Bros., Splatoon. They also have Animal Crossing. Those franchises alone can carry the company, but they do need some level of third-party engagement to remain competitive and to avoid stagnation. Without it, the platform risks feeling like a walled garden where only Nintendo's first-party titles matter. Here's the harsh reality: Most third-party games just can't compete with Nintendo's first-party offerings on that platform. Animal Crossing, for example, dominates the casual audience, while Mario and Zelda capture the core fan base. If a third-party game performs well, Nintendo faces a dilemma: either raise prices on their own titles or allow multi-platform releases to compete. But if Nintendo chooses to go multi-platform, they risk undermining their own hardware. Why buy a Nintendo console if the game you want is available on a more powerful and better graphics, faster load times, and more feature systems? This is a catch-22 Nintendo faces. Their consoles have always prioritized unique experience and first-party franchises over raw power, except for the GameCube. But in today's market, underpowered hardware combined with high prices and limited third-party support is a dangerous mix. Consumers are becoming increasingly aware of that. For many games, they could get a better experience elsewhere. Nintendo's insistence on controlling everything, from cartridge formats to release windows, limits the appeal of third-party titles and, over time, threatens overall competitiveness of their platform. Ultimately, Nintendo could adapt, find a balance, and make the Switch 2, or whatever comes next, a truly thriving ecosystem for developers and players alike. But that would mean being willing to take a financial cut, cede some control, and think long-term rather than relying solely on first-party dominance. History has shown that when Nintendo refuses to adapt, third-party support dries up, consoles underperform, and the company risks alienating a portion of its own audience. The writing is on the wall, and if Nintendo doesn't change, they may find themselves repeating past mistakes yet again. Alright everyone, I want to wrap this up by saying something important. Everything I've shared here is my opinion. I truly want Nintendo to succeed. When platforms are healthy and thriving, it breeds competition, and competition is always good for the consumer. It pushes companies to innovate, keep prices reasonable, and gives gamers more options. That's what a strong, balanced gaming ecosystem looks like. But unfortunately, the current leadership in the Nintendo community seems to care more about console warring than about the actual health of the industry or the players themselves. Some of them even seem to want Nintendo to monopolize the gaming world. And if that ever happens, trust me, the people who will suffer the most are the consumers. Price would go up, quality would stagnate, and innovation would slow down. That's not the future anyone should want. Honestly, the Nintendo community deserves better. They deserve a better class of content creators who aren't just in it for the clicks, who aren't afraid to speak truth to power, and who actually care about the long-term health, the platform, and the experience of players. That's exactly what I intend to give you. I'm here to cut through the noise, share honest opinions, and offer thoughtful critiques, not to blindly become a cheerleader. So as always, take what I say with a grain of salt, think critically, and remember, wanting Nintendo to succeed doesn't mean ignoring its flaws. It means holding them accountable, expecting more, and supporting a gaming ecosystem that benefits everyone. The community deserves it, and I'm not afraid to give it to them. And now it's time to read off the members of the channel. We got Koros Objective, Maximilian Pegasus 88, Mattfox 94, Shade Milkman, Oh No Is Justin, Brian Payne, Andy Ritz, J Wesby 65, C-Stars Piplup, Astrius Lane, Maximus 2400, and John Molina. Thank you so much for becoming part of the crew. And if you truly enjoy this content, why don't you think about becoming a member? It's only $1 a month. You get special emotes, badges, and you get a shout out at the end of each video until it becomes too long, and then it'll be turned into a credit roll. And also, I got an awesome merch lined up for you guys. I got amazing shirts, hoodies, I got coffee mugs, I got desk mats, I got a bunch of different kinds, so why don't you check it out also. And please like, share, and subscribe, and until next time guys, stay vigilant.
You can cry in the comments, but you won't survive. Like and subscribe if you feel that vibe. We're